Hello, and welcome to Economics and You. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson. Last time we were together, we looked at the goals of the nation, and particularly how economic goals were aligned to the broader goals. Today, we're going to look mostly at the the socialist economic system, and then include a brief comparison toward the end to the values of capitalism that we have looked at so much already. Now, as a quick refresher, every nation has to answer three questions through how they address their economy. Those three key questions are what to produce, how to produce it, or who would produce it, and who receives those goods. Those are the three basic questions that any economy needs to answer. In command economies, where we've got socialism, and market economies, which are capitalism, we have very different answers to these three questions. That's what we're going to be examining today. Now, in a pure socialist system, which doesn't exist, but let's look at a pure hypothetical socialist system, we see little to no private property. Everything is owned by the government. The government controls all factors of production, all the land, all the labor, all the capital. Now, the government also manages the production, determines how it is produced, and the distribution of all products. Now, very few nations operate this way, but there are certain sectors of their economy which are government controlled. To get perspective on this, the worldwide oil reserves, a somewhat dated number here, are listed off to the right of the screen. And we see that the Saudi Arabian Oil Company, which is a state-owned company, Venezuela's is a state-owned company, Iran's is a state-owned company. These non-private institutions control tremendous amounts of the world's oil supply. They manage all those factors of production themselves. So this type of management does exist, although in all three of those countries, a degree of market and private property does exist. These ideas came from an individual known as Karl Marx. Karl Marx believed that wealthy capitalists would always seek to oppress the people, that the profit incentive would lead these capitalists to push wages so low that individuals would be forced into a type of free market slavery. Anytime the business put profit as their main goal, they did so at the cost of their workers. And he believed very fervently that any business earning a profit was doing so at the cost of those employees. Now, Marx wanted to recreate a society where all factors of production would fall under joint ownership, and all profit would be distributed amongst all of those individuals who contributed their labor. Communism arose because of Marx's views. He was instrumental in this. He wrote a book called The Communist Manifesto, which outlined how he believed a socialist communist society would evolve and function. Now, in his views, socialism would eventually lead to a society that did not need any government interference in the economy, because all individuals operating within a single company, let's think of factory, all the workers in the factory would be equal owners in that factory and would make all the decisions around it and not need any government interference to dictate how to manage their collective property. But to actually create a system where this became true and his economic socialism became a reality, the opposite became true, in which strong central governments needed to enforce those policies. And over time, all property became the property of the government, as all people within a theoretical socialist communist country were equal partners in the country, all would share equally, but a strong authoritarian government was needed to put that in place. And in practice, it didn't work very well. Now, a different view of socialism is the democratic socialism. Marx came up with this idea, but people ran with it in different directions. Democratic socialism is the more popular version of socialism today. Here, governments control some areas of the economy, but not all areas of the economy. Private ownership exists and is important in a democratic socialist society, but a democratic socialist society recognizes that in some cases, the government is in a better position to run certain aspects of the economy. That is their belief. In the United States, this has been a very unpopular view for most of our history, although we have had periodic flirtations with socialism. And we are currently in one of those. The popularity of Bernie Sanders as a Democratic candidate for president, who did not succeed in getting that party's final nomination, but was very successful in 2015, 2016 in promoting his views, demonstrates that the United States is beginning to consider democratic socialism as a possible option. The balance to that is authoritarian socialism. This is where society overthrows all capitalist institutions. Private property on a large scale is abolished, and the central government seizes control of all land, major sources of labor, and capital. This is then led in a very top-down system where one ruler or one small group of rulers who claim their authority from the public make all of the economic decisions that affect that public. These communist societies were once fairly common. They began arising very rapidly in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, before beginning a rather rapid decline, particularly after the fall of the largest socialist nation, the Soviet Union. Now, supporters of capitalism support capitalism because within a capitalist society, you have more freedom. So the more free a society wants to be in terms of individual choice and individual options, the more likely they are to support capitalism as their option. Capitalism, compared to socialism, allows for greater economic growth and better market efficiency. Capitalist systems adjust more quickly to change, and from an economic standpoint, are more successful, although there are some certain social drawbacks within a pure capitalist society. Now, when we look at a pure capitalism, and we look at a completely unregulated market economy, we have very high rates of growth, but they are also very unsteady rates of growth, creating a lot of winners, but also a lot of losers. Now, let's remember that there are no pure capitalist societies. And the United States is certainly not a pure capitalist society. In the United States, the government has a role in planning our economy. But that role is shared with individuals and shared with private companies. And in the United States, compared to most modern economies in the world, the government's role in economic planning is far less. However, without that interference by the government, we do know from past experience that huge inequities would begin to exist within our economy. So within the Americans' system, we try to make sure, the government tries to ensure that those with economic power do not use that to oppress those without it. And we also try to make sure that these two cavemen right here have a market where they can go. And if this individual with a stick wants a rock, he knows where he can go to get that rock. If this individual with a rock wants a stick, he knows where he can go to get that stick. And the government makes sure that neither of these individuals are going to hit each other with the rock or the stick and take them both. That is the role of the American government in our economy. Next time, we're going to be looking at consumption, income, and decision-making, and how Americans come to rational decisions, and sometimes irrational decisions, in our American economy. Thank you very much for joining me today for this edition of Economics and You, and farewell.